You are listening to the B2B Marketing Mindset with Pete Monfre and Bill Lowell. We want to help demystify marketing to reduce risk, drive more and better opportunities, and grow your business. Are you ready to master marketing?
All right, welcome. I'm Pete Monfre. Let's get into the B2B Marketing Mindset, shall we? So welcome to episode 102. So it's our 102nd episode. And so we bring all kinds of guests here on the pod. That's what the cool kids call it. And today we've got a guest that can bring some insight into the skills you need to be a marketing leader in a company or an agency, or even if you're self-employed. He's been featured in Ad Age, Bloomberg, and Reuters. He's the author of Careers in E-commerce and Digital Marketing. He's also one of the top 1% of recruiters in the U.S. and the founder of Bernhart Associates Executive Search. But first, allow me to introduce my co-host, Mr. Bill Lowell, the man with a million-watt smile. Wow, that applause is loud. I'll turn that down a little bit.
We're having a family reunion up here, so that's why I don't remember.
Is that it? There's a lot of people in the room.
Exactly.
So beaming his signal from all the way in a remote village in an undisclosed location in Wisconsin, and he's the founder of Business Development Directives, a marketing research firm. You can find that at bddonline.com. So welcome again. You have a big audience there with you, a live audience.
Thank you. So if they get unruly, you'll have to forgive me.
Well, I'd imagine you have some bouncers and that kind of thing, like on Jerry.
They were here to celebrate our 100th podcast, Pete, and they just kind of, you've heard the saying, they just stayed and they're still here,
It's just still there. Well, it's too bad they didn't qualify for the $1 million prize. So
I was kind of hoping that Jerry would be like a psychologist or something, and he could give me some good insight into, what to say to get rid of these people. I mean, to gracefully let them go, but
well,
we'll see. Maybe he will anyhow.
Maybe he'll have some advice, but anyway, let's welcome Jerry Bernhart to the program. Welcome, Jerry.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I know it was a challenge to kind of narrow down the skills, because in this day and age, a marketing leader needs a really broad set of skills. I think more so than any other part of the company. But we're only a 40-minute show, so we had to narrow that down a little bit. But really pleased to have you on. You're truly an expert in your field. And do you want to tell us a little bit about your long career? I don't want to make it sound like you're old, but we're all old. And your particular focus, you've had some focus on marketing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Pretty much almost for my entire career, except the very beginning. I started off back in, when was it? 1990, 89. I don't know, it's been quite some time. I started off in the call center space, actually. I was with MRI, and they needed someone to run a desk to place call center directors and leaders. And the call center business was growing rapidly back in those days. And they were the ones taking all the inbound 1-800 calls, the infomercials you saw on TV, catalogs, people ordering stuff. And so I decided, okay, this sounds like it might be fun. Plus, a lot of these call centers were in the Midwest because of the time zone here. And most of them back in those days were onshore. They weren't overseas. And so there were some very large call centers, APAC and Sitel and all these companies that were in Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, the Dakotas, all up in Missouri. So I started off in that niche, and didn't take long, maybe about a year. After working at MRI, I figured, well, I can kind of do this myself. Funny thing, I had a non-compete clause that extended 50 miles around the office. And this is in Minneapolis, right? Couldn't set up shop in the same, with the same desk, call center, in this case, within 50 miles of where they were located. And I actually lived 51 miles away. So I was totally unrestrained, which really helped a lot, because being on your own is a whole different ball game, as we all know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it took a while before I, really got my feet under me as a solo recruiter. Then a couple of things happened. I began to learn more about this business called direct marketing. And that was the industry that was generating all these inbound calls for the centers. These were the marketers, the product companies, right?
Right.
Creating all these products that we all know, that we all bought out of catalogs and saw on television, all the direct response. It was a direct response, direct marketing back in the early 90s. It was something like, I remember the DMA put out some figures. It was like an $800 billion industry, something like 1 out of every 10 jobs in this country. And I was amazed when I saw this, but something around there, 1 out of every 10 dozen jobs in this country had some connection to direct marketing, right? Think about all the pieces involved. So I thought, that's where I want to be. I just want a real small piece of that 800 billion and I'll be happy, right? So what caught my attention was something called database marketing. And that was sort of the idea of using large amounts of data warehouses, as it were. And that was kind of the first iteration of personalization. And the technology allowed a lot of that to happen right on your desktop. You know, you have to go to a big room full of computers. We were at the point now, right, in technology where you could have this information right on your desk. And these companies, like the Finger Huts of the world and the Columbia Houses of the world and the Spiegels of the world, these are all kind of the category leaders,
right?
In analyzing all this data. The analytics was a whole other specialty, and these candidates were hard to find. Statisticians, modelers, right? So I made it my business to kind of focus in that niche because I have a econ math type background. And so I could kind of speak their language, sort of. And so I decided this is going to be a great specialty. I'm going to work on that. So I did. And then I ended up kind of moving up the food chain and placing the database marketers, the directors, the VPs who hired them and ran these departments. And that went on until probably the .com bust. I mean, that was a great run for 5-6 years, database marketing, went to all the shows and got to know everybody. And this is where I really learned the art and science of networking, because that's how we built my business, face to face, handshaking. And along the way, at the same time, I launched a website, which some people might remember, called directmarketingcareers.com. And it was the first marketing specific job posting site on the internet. Wow. I launched it, I think 95, 96, right in the earliest stages. And I'll never forget all these companies, many Fortune 1000s were signing up as quick as they could because they were looking for all these candidates in direct marketing, the database, and they were having trouble finding them on their own through the job boards that existed at the time, which are like Monster, Hot Jobs. We all remember those. So here comes a specialty site along with others. I wasn't the only one, but I was in marketing. I think I was the first one to come along. I was actually listed in Career Crossroads. It was like the top 100 sites at one point for job posting. And I thought, this is it. I'm on my way to becoming a .com zillionaire. And, but as I learned, it takes a lot of investment to keep a site like that going. And and I was really busy with my executive search business. I was doing both. And, as fun as it was learning how to run a website in these earliest days of the internet, commercial internet, my real bread and butter was the recruiting. So decided after about, 7 or 8 years. And plus, these other sites were handing me my lunch because Monster and these other big sites, they could launch a specialty niche, tomorrow and bury me, like the cockroach I was. I mean, those were getting really big, right? And I couldn't possibly compete against the likes of companies like that. So, but it was a fun run. I learned a lot.
Back in that time frame, we did a ton of business in direct marketing. That's one of my core capabilities. Bill and I both were working together back then at that time, and so sounds like we were all just working, but separately and united. I think that what's really interesting about this topic is the marketing business is changing so rapidly. You talk about, back then that things were new, and we're still doing database marketing. We're still doing deep data analytics. We're still,
Yeah.
you know, but it's a completely different ball game. So I thought it was really a great topic to talk about the kinds of skills. And I love that you came up with skills that are, I'm not sure what to call them. They're soft skills. It's not like, look, you got to be a database administrator. You're going to be an SEO expert. That's not what we're talking about. These are skills that people need to develop if they want to be competitive in today's marketplace. And they're probably not what you think. So, and I know
Well,
Bill and I have both been on the hiring side of the equation. And
yeah,
Bill worked in executive search as well. So,
yeah, that's what he was telling me. Well, we had agreed on a short list, like 5 different skills, but I've written so much on this topic over the years. I had to take a look at some of the stuff I wrote, and I came up with about maybe a dozen of them. They're all kind of important, and they've all been important, all these years. None of this is particularly new. These are just things that every marketer, needs to know, and some of this is maybe even more applicable for B2B. And we can go down some of these if you want. I wrote some of these down.
yeah, absolutely. I have some titles to put on the screen, and at least it'll try to keep us on track, but we can definitely talk about whatever we want. As they say in music, if you get the first chords and the first lyrics correct, and the last chords and the last lyrics, everything that happens in the middle is fair game. So, but the first thing that you mentioned on your list, the original list, was adaptability. And so I'd like to toss it over to Bill for a second to see what his thoughts are on the adaptability aspect, and then we'll come back to Jerry.
Well, I mean, it's either
Get the applause again. Get those
either,
people in control over
I don't know. No, stop that. Yeah. No, but the thing with adaptability, which I'm sure Jerry will mention, I mean, if you're not adapting to market trends, if you're not doing that, you're lost. I mean, this because we've talked about this a million times in the market research business. That's all about what we're trying to find out is how organizations need to adapt, how markets are changing, how people are changing. I mean, so it's like if you're not adapting, you're probably in serious trouble. Just like when Jerry's introduction, when he talked about just the evolution of how some of this came about. I mean, he's so right. And he could have gone out, I mean, this could have been a history lesson and taken us through the 2000s, the 2010s, now the 2020. But, this too, Pete. You and I have even adapted. I mean, even 5 years ago, I would have never thought about doing a podcast just because,
because
who thought about that? But here you go. So here's
what the heck is a podcast? I don't know.
Exactly. And a video podcast at that.
A video podcast and 102 episodes. So adaptability, I mean, beyond the obvious, I mean, we're constantly adapting and pivoting and changing. But what were your thoughts on that, Jerry?
Well, I wrote a piece on this some time back. Like I have on practically everything at one time or another. And I wrote a couple of things down that I thought might be informative to share. So there's adaptability, right? Mm-hmm. There's flexibility, and there's versatility. And people sometimes get them all confused. So, okay, what do you mean by adaptability? So I took a little snippet from what I wrote. Flexibility is really the willingness to adapt. It's your attitude, right? I'm willing to be adaptable, right? Flexibility is your willingness to adapt. Am I ready and willing to actually do this? So it's kind of important to separate all those things because adaptability requires both flexibility and versatility is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And a lot of people don't really think about that. Oh, I'm adaptable. Sure. Yeah, not a problem. Well, are you? Are you really? Are you flexible? Are you willing? Right? And are you versatile? Do you have the ability? Right? Not everybody has the ability to adapt. I mean, we see examples of that in everyday life. In business, I mean, we're living in a world of risk and instability. And if you don't have those qualities, then right off the bat, life gets a lot more challenging for you as you move up the chain of command in business. So I thought it was important to kind of point out that
Yeah,
there's
I
a
think
technology, and people sometimes get them confused.
those are great points. In fact, I wasn't even thinking of that either, but I think it does a pretty good job of describing me. Uh, you know, it's just been, I think when you own a marketing firm and you do a lot of things, and even though
Mm-hmm.
you have people doing those things, you end up learning all of those things. And so that has really served me well. But I think you also have to have an open mind. Change is
Absolutely.
hard for a lot of people.
It is.
But I think
Oh,
if it's too hard for you, you're not going to make it in this business. And again, Bill and I have been in business 34 years. And you've been in business at least that long. I think actually you've been a little longer. Um, you started in like 89?
yeah, around 89, 90.
Yeah. So
So what, you know, you don't have to be adaptable. I mean, you could be a plumber, you can be an electrician, you can do a lot of things and just swim in your lane.
Yeah,
You're
you
happy.
got to be
That's the
adaptable
whole
there too,
career.
though.
Right.
Jerry, you got to be adaptable because all my neighbors are putting in bidets now, and I think that the plumbers, if
Well,
they
now
were going
maybe
to
you
know
got,
how
I
to do
shouldn't,
that,
speaking out of school, because I'm not a plumber, so I really don't know how they work. But I
I'm
think
just sticking up for the plumbers of the world.
fair enough. Fair
yeah.
enough. But
You
Marketing,
know,
marketing is so crazy. Marketing is a big world. I mean,
yeah.
all the disciplines and everything you've got to know and all the knowledge. I guess that's my point. In order
Yeah.
to really grasp all this stuff, you had better be adaptable.
Yeah.
well,
It's funny. I would get. I'm sorry, Pete. I
go
interrupted
ahead.
you. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
A lot of times I'll get people that are looking to start their own business, or they're in their year 1 or 2 starting their business, and they want to have coffee with me or meet with me to get my advice. And one of the things that I always tell them is the business that you're starting today will not be the business you have in 3 years from now. So, and if you can't accept that,
Yeah.
I don't think you should be in business. And they think I'm smoking something, or but it's really true, and then 3 years from then it's going to be a different business. So it's like that's all about the adaptability.
You know, I
Absolutely.
am smoking something, and I
Okay.
won't meet with them. So, because I don't know but no, I think actually, all jokes aside, this is actually really important, and I wish more people understood this because, if you're a financial consultant, for example, you can take a few reports, and you can see the complete picture of a company's finances. Marketing is eons more complex than that.
Oh boy,
There's
is it
so
ever?
many moving pieces, yet I think at the same time, marketers aren't valued as much as, say, financial people. In fact, I saw a statistic that 80% of CEOs don't trust marketers.
Well, you can tell that just by the turnover among CMOs. I think the average tenure is what, 2 years? I mean, that speaks to that. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't, it's, I think there's a couple of parts to that. One is maybe they're not as capable, or they're trying to do too much, or there's maybe part of it is them, but part of it is expectations. But I think also a fundamental misunderstanding of what marketing is. And that's one reason we do this podcast, is we're trying to help people better understand marketing, make better decisions. And because marketing is hugely powerful. I always laugh when somebody says, well, marketing just doesn't work for us. Well, it's a gazillion-dollar industry, so it must be working for somebody. So maybe, if everybody's crazy but you, then you need to think about that for a little bit. But I think the other thing that I think is it really does lead us to our next point, because of that tenure issue. That's been around a long time, that issue. But leadership, you need to have leadership skills. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, that's pretty, very apparent. Leadership is, table stakes, right? I mean, and the thing is, I think a lot of people and I've seen this many times throughout my career here. Sometimes I'll be placing a manager into a director role, or a director into a VP role, and I see in some situations they're just not ready for that next step up, right? They don't have that wide spectrum of leadership skills that are so important to motivate and do all the things they do. I've written a lot of articles on this, and things like having the ethics and commitment to fairness and fostering a sense of belonging and instilling confidence. These are all things that are you know, these are things you can learn. You may not be born with it, but you can certainly, learn this, and you can learn it from mentors. You can learn it from bosses, but you have to learn it. I mean, in order to raise to the top, the leadership becomes probably among all the things we're talking about here, of all the different qualities we're discussing today, I would have to put that probably right at the top. And I think Bill would probably agree. And you guys have been in these positions, so you understand that.
Well, and what's interesting to me about that too is whether you're an outside contractor, consultant, there's still a leadership aspect, because you have to lead the client team oftentimes, or you need to lead strategic sessions, and then you have to come back to your company and your team and lead them. It's a
you
constant,
would know this. Yeah.
It's a constant leadership deal. And I don't know if I really signed up to be a leader. It didn't occur to me, I think, when I started this company.
See, I take it a little bit differently as my interpretation. I mean, I agree with that, but in my opinion, my humble opinion, and I've worked with hundreds of clients, the amount of leaders I could probably put on one hand. The amount of good managers, though, are plenty. You know what I mean? So, I think you really need to make that distinction between, like, what is a leader versus what is a really effective manager. And I think that those things are critical. But I think they're both really important. Don't get me wrong. It's just what's needed by the organization.
And making that step up is big, very
Yes.
big. Right. You have to have the vision, and that's just not how all managers think. So important that we mention that. That can
And some of them, they may have it, but they can't articulate it, Jerry. It's like, they just can't get it out, or they can't really be clear on it, and that's just a shame too. So it's not only having that vision, but it's being able to make sure that you can communicate it and have people follow you with it.
That's one thing I love about this program is I'm always like learning something, or I'm learning something even about myself, and it's making me think back to the early 90s when we started this company, and I wasn't a good manager either. Like, I really did not have the skills, but somehow yet we still managed to grow and make it happen. And so and I think that I'm still working on those skills, and I have a book that I'm just finishing up about leadership. That's basically everything I learned about leadership. I learned leading a band, and so it's made me really think through this idea of. I have to admit, a lot of times when I hear somebody starting to talk about leadership, I'm like, blah blah blah.
Right.
I think of like coaches and leadership this and leadership that. But when I think of my own experience through it, it's super important. I mean, I just don't think it can be underscored enough. You got to get people moving in the same direction. And part of being a good leader is being a good manager. And so I think there's a huge amount of overlap in that Venn diagram.
Can I share a comment? So one of my colleagues, he's vice president of human resources of a Fortune 500 company. He's a friend of mine. He says, you want to know the definition of a good leader? Turn around. And if no one's following you, you're not a good leader. But if people are following you, then you probably are. And I laugh at it, but it's really it's very, very true. So thank you for Thomas.
Yeah.
Well, and Jerry has 12,000 followers on LinkedIn.
There you go.
So there you go.
Yeah, but I'm not leading them.
You might have a vision that they're subscribing to, Jerry. So that's good.
Or like in Life of Brian, the Monty Python movie, where he's like, no, I'm not. Stop following me.
It's 30,000, and I've been.
I got the number wrong.
I've been having this battle with LinkedIn for 10 years. I hit that 10 years ago. That's the maximum, by the way.
Wow.
And I said, hey, how come I can't have any more? I have people asking me to connect and I can't. And they said, well, it was very arbitrary. Well, we don't think anybody could possibly know 30,000 people. You think? How many people do you know among your followers? That's not the point. The point is people would really like to follow me. They'd like to follow my postings, whatever it is they want to know about me, and they can't. So it's a and I don't know if that'll ever change, but the explanation to me made like no sense.
I'm aspiring to hit the limit, and I have to say this podcast is really, we're at a ton of followers, it's really been incredible, but it's affected our LinkedIn followers as well. So, but go ahead, Bill, and I want to hit the subscribe.
I was just going to tell Jerry he's got to adapt. He's got to adapt, and he should have a Jerry Bernhart volume 2 on LinkedIn, so that you tell all the new people, you got to go to volume 2 now. So.
Yeah,
right.
you gotta follow me here.
Well, then I'll get kicked off the platform if I do that.
Yeah.
But speaking of which, let me jump to this really quick. If you're listening to this on one of the podcast platforms, let's say Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you're only getting part of the picture. This is a video podcast, so you get to see all of our wild gesticulation and all of that. And so in order to do that, you want to go over to b2bmarketingmindset.com. You're going to find a lot more videos. You're going to find a lot more content. And that is a great place to subscribe as well, because you'll get a lot of featured content that isn't readily available. So b2bmarketingmindset.com, head over there and get the rest of the picture. So a little plug there for the program. I love how these points actually stack up on each other really well. So the next one is influencer change agent. And so not only do you have to adapt and lead, now you're in the next level of influencing and managing change.
Well, we can talk about influencing for a minute, because that's obviously very important in a matrixed organization. And just to be clear, this is not persuasion. People go, "Oh yeah, I'm a really good persuader." That's not influence. Not a persuader is the guy the guy selling Flex Seal on TV. That he's trying to persuade you to buy his product. Influencing is trying to motivate others to see your vision and to have them follow you to achieve that vision. And Bill can kind of maybe correct me if I'm off base on that, but that's kind of how I look at it.
You're assuming too much, Jerry.
Yeah. That's kind of how I view influencing. Although I have to tell you, on social media, they call them influencers, and they're trying to get you to buy stuff. So I'm not sure. They should call them persuaders. I've always had that, they're giving them the wrong label, but that's a whole other discussion.
That's a thing in marketing as well. A lot of these words have started to lose their meaning because they're so abused.
These are not influencers on Instagram. I mean, give me a break.
I think that's a really important distinction: persuasion versus influence. And it's a lot of, this podcast is an example of a thought leadership strategy. And we are trying to influence people, but we're not trying to be influencers in the way that people think of that. We're trying to help people make better decisions. We're trying to educate people. We're trying to share our knowledge. And at the same time, it does position us as people. I hope that we know what we're talking about. I guess that's for the viewers to decide. Do we know what we're talking about or not?
I think it's exactly like you're talking about, and that's part of leadership. I mean, influence, as far as I'm concerned, is part of a good leader. And so I think that's where, I think it really fits with, just like you said, Pete, with the next topic and how it works, because that's what you're really trying to do, to get people, like Jerry said, to follow you or to follow your ideas. But maybe it would be interesting if, Jerry, if you have an example or two of, I don't know, did you ever have a search or a client or whatever, or somebody that was really good at influencing that you came across, or something, and maybe you can share a trait or two or some example of how they did that? Or is that catching you too far off guard here?
Or they influenced me, or what do you mean? Give me an example.
I guess what I'm looking for is, you have a client, influencer is an important category. Do you have an example of how you assess that, or how you found that, or somebody that had a really good story about how they influenced, or why you even have that as a topic? I guess I'd be curious about that.
Well, I think maybe I learned from others that I saw who were good influencers. And I did that when I went to trade shows. I would see my competitors working with companies that I could only dream about working with. How did they do that? How do you work with a Capital One? I mean, how do you get their attention, right? He didn't persuade anyone, but he influenced them, or she, and I could see them at work. I could, I saw them when they were having their discussions. I saw vendors, very successful vendors, printers, data people, all the vendors in the direct marketing business and even in e-commerce, doing search and SEO and content and email, all the things we work with. And some are very successful and they land great clients. Well, how do they do that? Right? They don't twist their arms. We know that. They influence them. Right. So I just try to learn by observing. How do they do it? And that's kind of what I've tried to do. And I think I've done an okay job at trying to influence companies to work with me. And some clients are great at it, others not so much. And that's just I can't observe that being inside the company and watching how they manage and behave, but I can see that outside and how they grow the business and the companies they work with, the partners they have. I mean, you can learn a lot about influencing just by looking at how other influencers are successful.
I read somewhere that there's only two ways to get someone to do what you want them to. One is by force, and one is to inspire them to follow you and see your vision, and to see that it's in their best interest to do what you want. And so, but I think the other half of this, the change part of it, by its nature, marketing is about a change in the status quo, right? Hey, we're not getting enough leads. Hey, we're not growing as fast. Hey, revenue is flat. Hey, our brand doesn't fit us anymore, right? It's all about change, and that's an entire topic. But I mean, I think we're hitting on some skills that maybe people out there that are looking for work, they're so focused on their technical skills that I think that's why I thought these were so important. These are things that you have to develop. It's not easy to develop them, but I think through mentors and coaches and reading and practice, that you can get very good at these things. But I'll tell you what, we used to say, I grew up in Wyoming, and we would say, if you don't like the weather, wait about 5 minutes and it'll change. And I think that sums marketing up pretty well as well.
Change management is particularly important in B2B, and I've talked a lot about this and written about it because many of these companies are very traditional, as we know. I work with manufacturers from time to time. I worked with one in Chicago, and they were making this same product for 40 years. This is all they were doing, and they had customers. They were selling products to contractors and architects, things of that nature. They wanted to start a B2C channel, direct channel, right, to sell their products to consumers. So I needed to place somebody. I placed a chief marketing officer with them. One of the things that this person needed to do was to help them understand that, all right, there's going to be some changes involved in doing this. You want to go B2C, direct to consumer. You're talking about a new business model, and this is something that they're just not accustomed to doing. The entire organization might go through, a transition or a change in order to stay relevant and viable and to scale. And this is not easy for a lot of people. I would fail miserably at that. I mean, when I find a B2B'er who's a real champion of change management, it's like, wow, this person really has a valuable skill, because you're talking about, in the case of a traditional B2B'er, let's say a manufacturer, distributor, whatever, who's going to have to rethink the way they do things. I mean, that's just not an easy task, and influencing obviously is an important part of that. But I have great respect for candidates who have that ability, and it's not something that everybody can do. No question about it. It can be very challenging, as both of you would know.
Now, Jerry, let me ask you a question really quick. Do you work with candidates and employers, or just employers?
When you say, I recruit candidates and place them with clients. Candidates don't pay me for my services. Is that what you mean?
Right. Well, I mean that some recruiters will be like, hey, look, if you're a candidate, don't even reach out. I mean, it's not, I'll find you. Other recruiters will say, hey, look, I like to know I have a pool of people that I can, I'm not sure how that works.
I get resumes. No, I get a flow of resumes here every day.
Ah, all right.
Yeah.
So there is maybe some value in that. But you better mind these points, folks. Let's go to our next point. Collaborative ability. So
Yeah.
you need to be a collaborator to be a marketer. Again, some of these might seem obvious, but I don't know if they're that obvious.
Well, now here's something I saw. I don't know where I saw this. I wrote this down. I thought this was cool. So I got to give credit to somebody out there because I saw this many years ago. I put it in a piece that I wrote. So I looked it up and printed it out. So this guy, this author, took collaborative and each letter gave it a meaning. So I thought it was great. So
Hmm.
the C, collaborative, the C was communicate. Okay, pretty obvious. Communication skills are going to be really important. The O was obtain. Gain assistance from others, find out what others are doing. Okay, that's kind of cool. L in collaborative, L, locate. So find needed resources and locate subject matter experts. Okay, I see that. The next L, learn. Deepen your expertise. Know more. Know as much as you can to help others. Assist, that's the A in collaborative, the first A. And that's respond to a request or submit to a proposal or something along those lines. Wait, the next would be, what am I missing? Build. Collaborative. B is build. Develop a product, create a presentation. Next is O, offer. Provide points of view, praise, recognize, thank colleagues. Great, all makes sense. R is resolve. Identify issues and solve problems. Ask, request advice or submit a query. Transfer, which kind of wasn't sure about that one, but he said it means transferring knowledge and sharing content. That makes sense. Innovate, I, improving ways of doing things. Absolutely. Develop new products and processes. O is onboard, onboarding new hires or clients, and the network is working together as part of a team. I just thought that was pretty cool. Collaborative.
Wow.
All the components of collaborative. That kind of says it all, really.
And
I
it's
can't
such a
say it
long
better.
word.
I couldn't say it any better. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. In fact, that'll make a nice little standalone clip, I think, and also a spelling lesson.
Yeah.
No, nowadays, I mean, this is one thing I see with job descriptions all the time, where they're listing a set of skills that no one human being is ever going to have.
Yeah.
And so collaboration is not an optional thing.
No.
You can't possibly do everything when it comes to marketing. What are your thoughts on those crazy unicorn job descriptions?
It's been getting worse. I mean, I saw them 30 years ago. They were still around, right? They're written by people who really don't know how to. I need to be careful what I say here because I write job descriptions and I think I write really damn good ones. I consider that to be among my strengths, right? And the ones I see are written by people who they just haven't written a lot of job descriptions, or maybe what they're doing now, maybe, is using artificial intelligence, which spits out all this stuff. I'm not really sure. I suspect that's what a lot are doing now. I don't think they're sitting down and writing these like they used to. I think they're depending a lot on technology, and they're just going to come out with stuff. I don't know how they come up with what they come up with, but the bottom line is the ones that are unrealistic. That just tells me that they're not very adept at writing job descriptions that are going to attract the kind of talent you need for whatever it is you need. You need the best candidate you can fill at this moment in time for the problem you need to solve. And if you're going to start throwing in a bunch of stuff and you're going to turn people away.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
You're just going to flat out discourage. People are going to go, they don't know what they're looking for. This is crazy. I'm not even going to apply. That kind of thing can backfire. It's not about trying to find that purple squirrel. It just isn't. Find somebody who has 80. I've always said this. Find somebody who has 80 or 90% of what you need. Even 80% is sufficient. The rest of the 20 gives them room to grow into the role, show what they can do. They have the potential. That's really what you want. You're not looking for 100%. Hiring is not about looking for the perfect person. It's really about minimizing your loss. Is really what it is, and trying to retain your best talent as long as you can, right? But a lot of these candidates, I know a lot of, I can think of so many people I placed who did not check every single checkbox. They didn't have to. They checked most of them, but boy, they sure had the potential to knock it out of the park, right? And that's what you're missing, right? When you start writing them like that. But don't get me started. We could talk for an hour. Yeah.
Bill, what have you seen? I mean, you've been very active with Whitewater, Wisconsin. A lot of people entering the job market. How are they receiving these kind of insane requirements?
It's interesting, and then I want to mention something about being collaborative too. So, I do think you're seeing a lot of the unrealistic ones that are being put out there, or where it has everything in them. And I think Jerry's absolutely right. Go for the 80% or whatever. But and you're absolutely right too. I've seen a lot of people decide they're not even going to apply just because they're like either overwhelmed or thinking they don't have all of those skills that they're looking for. But
which
it's
raises
sad
questions
because
about, do they really know what they want?
that's exactly it.
Starts planting the seeds of doubt, and that's what you don't want, scaring these people away.
Yeah. And not to pick on the human resource function, but I could give you horror stories about what I've seen from the marketing end of that. But, sometimes they don't truly understand. They might be able to write something or be able to interview one of the leading execs and then write up what they're looking for, but they certainly don't know how to really effectively look at some of those skills, or to be able to assess it for all of the various functions. I mean, they may have generalistic backgrounds, but they don't have the specific, and that's just a frightening object.
I mean, they're interviewing a hiring manager to find out what they need to write in the job description, and they're not coming back. If the hiring manager is saying, "Here, I want all this stuff," and a hiring manager has a wish list, you can't blame them. I don't really blame anyone. I certainly don't blame HR, because they just get their data, from the hiring manager. This is what
I'll give you an example. We had one that this person was probably one of the best training and development, leadership, organizational development people in the state of Wisconsin. I mean, just fabulous. And she was looking for a position, and it was really interesting because the place that should have hired her didn't hire her. And later I went back and checked on it to say, like, what was going on? Why didn't you hire? They were this is so terrible. They were so naive that they didn't even know some of the new terminology. And they said, well, it didn't have this term and this term and this term that the manager was using. I'm like, do you realize everything she's got is like on the cutting edge right now? So it's like you just blew it. But unfortunately, you get that as well.
A lot of stories like that.
So I guess to all of our listeners out there, if you're doing marketing and you're trying to do something, you got to have some buzzwords that people understand, even if you're on the cutting edge, because otherwise people might be behind you and not be able to catch up as fast. It's sad. It's really sad.
You had a point on collaboration.
The collaboration part that I wanted to mention, though, is, and that's really key. And I have taught both leadership and team building at UW-Whitewater. So not that makes me an expert by any means, but one of the things that I think collaborative is both internally and externally. Not only are they able to rally their internal resources and their internal staff and do some cross-functional stuff with other departments, that's a critical skill for collaboration, I think. But then the other thing is, are we able to put together some constituents on the outside world, whether that means other partners, vendors? Are we able to put something together from a creative standpoint that could really solve a client's problem? I'll give you an example. One of the architectural firms, one of the leading architectural firms in the state of Wisconsin, is a client of ours, and they were applying to design the Milwaukee Art Museum. And I don't know if the listeners have ever seen that, but it is just like spectacular piece of work. Well, they realized that maybe coming in by themselves may not be able to pull this off, just because somebody might say, well, do you have the skills to do it? You're local, So they brought in the Calatrava person from Spain, and he did it, and they partnered with him. And you talk about collaboration that is world class. If you have not seen the Milwaukee Art Museum, you're really missing it, because that was just a beautiful piece of art for the art museum. So, but a great collaboration story. But to me, that signifies somebody that was able to put together partnerships in order to do what's necessary, and they did it.
Yep. I put together a partnership at the Calatrava. That's where my wife and I got married. Heidi and I got
congratulations.
married. I don't know if you remember that.
That is,
but anyway,
I don't think I knew you then.
But. I don't know. Oh, that's true. That might have been. Yeah, that was maybe before. I don't know. I can't. Dates escape me. But let's. We're running out of time. But we want to get to this next point. Business acumen. Business acumen. This is the thing that I hear the most. as somebody who is talking to prospects and clients all the time, this is what clients and companies are dying for. I think our marketing people that don't live in the world of theoretical, creative, cows with sunglasses kinds of thinking, but actually kind of understand not only how business works, but marketing's role in that business.
Yeah, it's the P&L part of it. The P&L, what at the end of the day, what are we here to do? Right? We're here to grow revenues. We're here to improve margins. We're here to, whatever it may be, create brands that people love, right? You have to draw a dotted line. And I always tell everybody when you're interviewing, if you can somehow draw a dotted line between what you do, this job, and what the company or business is trying to achieve, the better off you are. Because then you're showing that this is the value I bring to the business. And that can be any number of things, but that's a connection that I tell everybody to think about when they're talking to employers, because I can help the business. Here's how I can help the business, right? Kind of the business. And having that experience, having that track record is a big plus, obviously. Instead of just, if your head's down and you're an analyst, that's great. You can do that your whole career and be happy. But if you want to move up and you want to become, a bigger leader, bigger part of any company, then obviously this is where MBAs come in, things of that nature, right?
Well, and I think if you're a consultant or an agency, this becomes crucial to your survival, because one of the things that I hear all of the time is, and we do marketing audits for companies or new business audits, because we also look at sales, but we do these audits, and the one thing I hear the most is we just don't see a connection between the marketing that we're investing in and revenue. Okay. And usually what I find is that the marketing people are just not even connected to the business strategy. Sometimes it's not their fault though, because they're being isolated by management.
It's the culture of the company. Right.
They're not being let in, right? Or sometimes the marketing people, they just don't have those skills. They don't have that experience. I think Bill and I have some advantage because, we are subject matter experts. I don't like to call myself an expert, but I guess I am objectively, at least in this narrow subject. I could write a book about the things I don't know about. But I think because we are also simultaneously, we've run companies our entire lives. This is what it kind of sounds sad, doesn't it? Like, this is what we've done with our lives. But this is what we do. And so we're balancing those skill sets all of the time. We're running the company. We're dealing with people. We're dealing with, we're reading our own financials. We're doing all of those things, and we're deconstructing and reconstructing client business all the time. So I think business acumen wins out of the 5. That's going to be my
that'd be your top choice.
That's my top choice. But let's jump to this. Everybody stand by. We'll go to final thoughts. We'll wrap this up. All right. And who knows where our audio went, but it went somewhere other than here. Final thoughts. Let's start with. I always like to put Bill on the spot to start with final thoughts. It's a tradition we have.
Final thoughts. I think that every listener needs one of your audits, Pete. So let's start with that. That's key. Right. So, I think it doesn't matter what we're talking about today, whether it's adaptable leadership or whatever. I think the bottom line is, and Jerry, you kind of said this early on, it's what does the organization need at the time? And I think what are those skills that are going to help in the hiring decision? And it's about job match, because if somebody doesn't have those skills, or if that company's not able to articulate what it is that they're looking for, or they have that whole laundry list, it's going to be a nightmare, and it's just going to be a sad situation. So then you're dealing with crisis. So, I think I think it's about job match. I think it's about the company articulating what they need. And I think it's what is it that we need from the individual, and really clearly be able to discern that difference, I think is critical.
Awesome. Yeah. Jerry, final thoughts.
Boy, I could talk about that all day. I would just say, and I said this 10 years ago, I said this 20 years ago, it is a killer time to be a marketer. We live in an amazing age, and we have for many, many years. This is a time for marketers, and more than ever. Think about all the channels and the platforms and all the things you can learn and test and fail and test again and succeed. I mean, it's an exciting time to be in this space, and it's only going to be even more exciting. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like 5-10 years ago. So for any younger people who are viewing this, wondering, is marketing a career I should seriously look at? I'm very biased when I say this because I've been doing this for a long time, but hell yes. Companies are always going to need them, good ones. And if you're going to go into marketing, be a good one. Don't be mediocre. Don't get by. Be as damn good as you can be. If you're going to do something for 8 hours a day, kill it. And if it's going to be marketing, great. You got all the opportunity in the world to learn and get better. You'll have mentors and colleagues and people who will teach you. And I don't know, I can't think of too many better professions. But then again, it's all I've really been exposed to for all these years. I think it has a very bright future.
That's good to hear. And I think that the bottom line is that learn business skills, not just marketing, because I've spent my life self-employed in this business, but I've seen people go on and work for corporations and do really well for themselves, but there's almost a whole separate set of skills that you need to kind of make that work. And I think, oh my goodness, my producer's laughing at me because we have graphics running on their own. But I think that you can get way too focused on tactics and not really have these business skills, and that's what's going to set you apart from other candidates. And so what a great topic, and we could go on, and I hope people have stuck with us this long. We always joke that nobody's watching at this point of the program, so we can do whatever we want. But anyway, Jerry, thank you so much. What a great topic, and I hope that we can collaborate and lead and adapt and influence together in the future.
Does Jerry have a website that he wants to point out for the listeners, Pete?
What's the website, Jerry?
Bernhart.com, which, by the way, I launched in '95. I was the first recruiter in the direct marketing space to have a website. People thought this will last for a month. Nobody thought it was going to mean anything. Yeah,
we'll put a link to that.
Because now that domain has some real panache. It's almost 30 years old. So yeah.
Wow. We'll put a link to that in the comments, and if you need a new website, let us know. We'll take care of you on that. So, but anyway, we are here every Thursday, 11 o'clock Central, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Actually, no, we just stopped broadcasting to Facebook because they're jerks. Twitter, Twitch for some reason, and of course, all of the major podcast platforms. And so thank you for joining us, and everybody hang around here on the panel, and we'll sign it off. See you all next week.
You've been listening to the B2B Marketing Mindset with Pete Monfre and Bill Lowell. Add to the conversation by commenting, sharing, and liking. And don't forget to subscribe and check out the links in the comments. Learn more at b2bmarketingmindset.com.